Hello there. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to talk about this thing, Zubin Mehta, the complete Warner recordings. Now, this box was made possible because we now have EMI and Teldec as part of the same label, under the same umbrella. So we could actually find a box of all of the recordings he did for those labels. You know, the situation with Zubin Mehta is a bit of a mess, discographically, at least as far as some of his recordings go. We've already had a big Sony box that features most of his stuff with the New York Phil, the Berlin Phil, and the Israel Phil. And there was the Decca box that had his Los Angeles recordings, which is probably the best of his work so far, at least anyway. And there was also a Decca box that was like the symphony recordings, that was a mishmash of things from Israel and Los Angeles and Vienna. But we still don't have a Vienna box, which we really should have, if we're going to be complete. And then there are also some Decca things that he did that don't fall into any category. For example, the Puccini Turandot with Sutherland and Pavarotti. I mean, there are those recordings. Probably what they ought to do, or should have done, is just issue a complete Decca, universal box. But that would be a little bit redundant at this point. Not that they won't do it. You never know with these people, right? So where does this put us? Let us take a look, as we always do, with this thing. How many CDs are there? There are 27 CDs and 3 DVDs. And you get a little bookie, a little booklet. And we're going to just go through them and see what we have. It's always so much fun to do this, isn't it? I mean, I hope you get sort of the same sense I do of opening up a big present to see what's inside. And we can be excited or disappointed as the case may be. So this is all here. And there is our good friend, Mr. Mehta, Maestro Mehta. And let's see. Okay. Maybe I can reinsert these as we go. We begin with Zubin Mehta and Ravi Shankar. This is his Raga Mala. Yeah, his Sitar Concerto number 2. This is a big piece. It's 52 minutes long. Holy mackerel. Nice to have. It's good to have this music. It really is. Mehta, and this is, you'll see as this box goes on, was one of those guys who was willing to do just about anything. And I think that's a good thing. He's a little bit like Leopold Stokowski doing Fantasia. Remember, everyone dumped on him because he did Fantasia, and Mehta did the Three Tenors, which we'll have, which is in here. He loved all kinds of music, and he was willing to make all kinds of recordings. And what's also true about Zubin Mehta, which isn't true about so many other conductors, is that he had really, really close relationships with a top-notch group of soloists who he was happy to work with. And so he had a very collegial relationship as an accompanist conductor, almost like Eugene Ormandy did. And for that, he also gets a lot of guff. He's not always taken seriously. But he's a very, very good accompanist, and they're very good soloists. And so, as you'll see, it's wonderful to have somebody who will actually work with colleagues in making music that way. Karajan, he was a pain in the ass. He hated being an accompanist. He wanted to be the top dog at all times. And he famously didn't get along with a lot of soloists. Bernstein had his group of soloists too, who he sort of got along with. But by and large, the hotshot conductors were hard to deal with as colleagues, and Zubin Mehta is a colleague. Like I said, as Eugene Ormandy was a colleague. And I think that's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful quality, which is insufficiently appreciated when it comes to conductors, because they're supposed to be the stars always taking center stage. Collegiality is not considered a plus. Let's consider it a plus. Let's just change our perspective there and give him the credit. Now here is This is really a little ridiculous. Okay, so we get Peter and the Wolf and the Carnival of the Animals with the Lebec sisters in the Carnival of the Animals. The Carnival of the Animals has, in this case, has the words by Ogden Nash, which are delightful by themselves, but I detest them. When you hear them with the Carnival of the Animals, I just want to hear the music. I don't want to hear talking. And on this first disc, you get two Peters and the Wolf, or two Peter and the Wolves. One of them is in auf Deutsch, and one of them is in English. And I have to say, and Itzhak Perlman's the narrator, by the way. Speaking of colleagues, okay. This is not one of my favorite discs. And even stupider, if possible, is this. The same thing all over again, except you get the narration en français, and in Nederlandisch. You get it in Dutch, which the Nederlandische vertelling. Wow, isn't that exciting? I mean, I guess if you're Nederlandish, it is exciting. That's a whole disc you're paying for. That I don't get. And, for Carnival of the Animals, I don't think they use Ogden Nash's verses. I don't know. I wouldn't even listen to it. All right, next. This is nice. Yeah, the Cacciatorian Violin Concerto with Perlman. You won't hear a better Cacciatorian Violin Concerto. Assuming you like the Cacciatorian Violin Concerto, you also get the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto, which is splendid, and the Tchaikovsky Meditation, orchestrated by Glazunov. It's a wonderful violin concerto disc. What can you say? I mean, I think the Cacciatorian is trash, but hey, maybe you like it. Knock yourself out. Next, Mahler 1, including Blumina, with the Israel Philharmonic. Here's a recording nobody paid much attention to. Mehta always did a very good Mahler 1. His best, though, is the one on Decca with the Israel Philharmonic without Blumina. But for Blumina ones, this is nice to have. That's really kind of cool. That really is. Bruch. Max Bruch, his Scottish Fantasy, and the second violin concerto, not the one everyone listens to, the G minor, the first violin concerto. And this is also with Perlman and the Israel Philharmonic, and it's first class, right? I mean, what's not to love? And this is a very good disc. This is the Shostakovich Violin Concerto with the Glazunov Violin Concerto. Now, of course, all of these discs are in the EMI Perlman edition, which I happen to have. So if you have the EMI Perlman edition, this will be duplicative. And of course, you're not really getting these for Zubin Mehta because he's the accompanist. You're getting them for Itzhak Perlman, who's the violinist. And so, that's the planets. The planets with the New York Philharmonic. Now, Mehta's Tel Deck recordings with the New York Philharmonic were really, really very good. I mean, mostly first class. They really were. He did a terrific Planets with the Los Angeles Philharmonic on Decca. This was a remake, but it's just as good. It's really, really fine. And they were first rate sonically, beautifully recorded sonically. This was at the end of his tenure in New York, and he sort of had an Indian summer, made some very, very good recordings. That's one of them. Also, let us see here, as I'm putting these things away. Sibelius, Second Symphony in Finlandia. These are all performances that everyone poo-poos. It was just another, standard repertoire, not terribly important recording when they came out. But you listen to them again and you begin to appreciate just how good they are. It's a very good Sibelius, too. It doesn't dawdle. It's well played. It's beautifully recorded. It's nice. It's very nice. If you compare it to all the other Sibelius 2s out there, well, it's better than some. It's not as good as others, but it's very good. It's on the plus side, on the whole. And this is the Mahler 5. This is the Mahler 5. I've seen some people say that his LA Mahler 5 is the best. I think this is his best. And I think it's one of the great Mahler 5s out there. The playing on this recording is wonderful. And the interpretation is wonderful. I mean, it says something about Mehta as a conductor, I think, that Mahler's 5th, which is the one that everyone gets wrong. It's like the Brahms 3rd, It's the one that gets the most lousy recordings. It's the Mahler Symphony that Mehta does the best. He's never had a problem with it. He conducts a beautifully shaped, exciting, well-proportioned, intelligent, passionate, exciting Mahler 5. And nobody talks about it, but he's done it twice. And this has brass playing in it. Holy smokes. Amazing brass playing, especially in that second movement. Wow. It's a great Mahler 5, folks. Absolutely a great Mahler 5. You may like the LA one better. You may like the New York one better. Take your pick. They're both terrific. And the Rite of Spring with the Stravinsky Symphony in 3 movements. Now, Mehta always did a great Rite of Spring. Always. And there are at least 4 of them. There were 2 in New York, and this is the better of the 2. There was a sensational one in Los Angeles, and there's a great one on Orfeo, a live one with a Vienna Philharmonic that shocked me to death. It's amazingly exciting. Terrific. So that's nice to have. Okay. This is a Gershwin thing. An American in Paris, the Cuban Overture, which is really good. I love that. I played the claves in the Cuban Overture. I can go get you my claves and play the part if you want. And then excerpts from Porgy and Bess with Roberta Alexander and Greg Baker and the New York choral artists. It's actually nice to hear the Porgy and Bess stuff done as, actual arias, if you want to call them that, as songs and choruses, rather than the usual symphonic synthesis thing. Oh, I love this disc. This is great. This is just great. This is one of the best things Perlman ever did. The violin concertos by Castelnuovo Tedesco and Paul Ben-Chaim. Perlman was not big on doing unusual repertoire. He was not a questing soul who commissioned a lot of new works and did contemporary music. So for him to dig out these 2 very, very worthy and beautiful concertos and play them as well as he does was a big deal, because you likely will not hear them done better. And they're both marvelous. Absolutely marvelous. The Castelnuovo Tedesco, I once said, it's like the Shlomo of violin concertos. It sounds a lot like, biblical film music, but it's marvelous. And the Ben Chaim is a very, very solid piece. He's a good composer. He wrote a lot of good music. I got a whole pile of his scores sitting over in the other room there, and they're really worth performing. His music is excellent. And more violin stuff. And this is with Maxim Vengerov, who's fantastic. Paganini Violin Concerto No. 1, Carmen Fantasy, the Sanson Havanaise, and the Introduction and Rondo Capriccioso. This is just great fiddling. I mean, fantastic fiddling. It's not, music that's going to win any awards for profundity, but this was Vengerov, when he burst on the scene as a dazzling Russian virtuoso, and that's what he sounds like. It's a great record. Of course, it's in the Vengerov box. There is a Vengerov box. It's probably out of print now, but even before the EMI Teldec merger, the Teldec Warner issued a Vengerov box. This is fun. This is Tchaikovsky 1812 Overture, Capriccio Italien, Swan Lake Suite, March Slav with the Israel Phil and Zubin, and they play loudly. And that's about all we really need in that music, isn't it? Carmina Burana with the London Phil and Mehta. I mean, another really good Carmina Burana. There's about 30 billion of them. Again, it's one that we tend to overlook. This is a just plain exciting performance of music that is just plain exciting. It has nothing else going for it. It's tuneful, it's exciting, it's colorful, it's tuneful, it's exciting, it's a colorful performance. And so we are all happy. Perfectly happy. Oh, this is interesting. This is London Phil again, the Symphonie Fantastique with the the Roman Carnival Overture and the Beatrice and Benedict Overture. Nice couplings, nice performances. The symphony is, let me see something here. I just wanted to see, is really rather well done. I mean, it has a slow movement that doesn't put you to sleep, and it's exciting again, and not a performance that anyone ever talks about because there are just too many Symphony Fantastiques out there, and so no one is prepared to give it time of day. But if you have the Mehta box and it's in there, you won't be disappointed. It's a good Fantastique. Oh, I love this one. This is the Israel Philharmonic Mahler 2. Now, Mehta's Mahler 2, the one that everybody talks about, is the Vienna one because it's Vienna, and really because it's the best one that was ever done in Vienna. Vienna, has made a lot of bad Mahler recordings. And the best ones are not always the ones you might expect. And Mehta's Mahler 2 in Vienna is absolutely terrific. He does a really powerful, punchy Mahler 2. I like this one just as much. This is really exciting. It's even more exciting than the Vienna one. It really is. As you can see, it all fits on one disc. I mean, it's not terribly slow. It's like, 76 minutes or so? I mean, it's the regular tempos. This is a very exciting, very well played, very well recorded Mahler 2. It really is. And I love it. I always liked it much more than anyone else. So I may be an outlier when it comes to that. Not that I'm wrong. Heaven forbid. But it's a very exciting Mahler 2. Now we get, the Franck D minor and the Saint-Saëns Organ Symphony with the Berlin Philharmonic. Again, these are really good. These are very, very good. The Franck is particularly good. The Franck is a pedal to the metal, exciting performance of the Franck. The Saint-Saëns, everyone will have their favorites. There's, getting the organ to balance well in the finale, But it's a nice coupling, and it's fun to hear. I'm enjoying this box so far. I really am. I mean, look at all the stuff it's in here. They're just solid, enjoyable performances. They really are. Often like the Decca box. Mehta was, people will say maybe he's not the most profound guy out there, but he was awfully reliable. I mean, he knew what he was doing, and he stuck to repertoire. He played well. Mahler 6 with the Israel Phil. I never really cared much for this Mahler 6. I'm not quite sure why. It has some wonderful points, but it just seems to me it lacks a certain intensity. And here I think maybe there is some reason behind a charge of a certain superficiality. It's an exciting performance, but it doesn't go very deep, and it's not scary enough. Especially the finale, the beginning of the finale, it should really be a gut wrencher, and that my guts aren't wrenched. And if my guts aren't wrenched in Mahler 6, then I just never mind. I was interrupted in having my guts wrenched by the Three Tenors. Okay, we know what that is. No point in saying anymore. Sold 100 billion trillion zillion copies. If you don't have one, you probably should, because you should be the 100 billion zillion trillion and one copy that it sold. Now we get into operas. This is Mehta was a very good opera conductor. Really, because he's a really, really good accompanist. So his operas are usually pretty good. This is sort of a controversial pick. This is Aida with what a hell of a cast. Birgit Nilsson, Franco Corelli, Grace Bumbry. I mean, this is a fun Aida. I like this Aida. Nilsson was, they talked about skating on the Nile, because she was considered to be cold in Italian opera, a frigid interpreter, although why exactly the same vocal qualities were not considered frigid in Wagner is something that has never been sufficiently answered to my satisfaction. But that's a big, noisy, loud, screaming Aida. And what's not to love? And then we get Tosca. Tosca with Placido Domingo, Catherine Malfitano, and Ruggiero Raimondi. This is the soundtrack to a DVD, which we also get here. So you get this thing twice. And, the DVD was the one that was set in all of the actual locations in Rome, which was not the first time that was done. But I suppose that, the Tosca is more fun to watch than it is to listen to away from the visual element. And the next opera is La Traviata with Etteri Gvazava and Jose Cura and Rolando Panerai. I mean, it's a nice picture. This is not a Traviata that I think we need to worry about. Again, is it horrible? No. Is it memorable? No. So that's that. Then we get the DVDs. The 3 DVDs. The DVDs are Perlman in Russia. Perlman in Russia. I won't watch that. Will you? I couldn't care less. The Three Tenors. Well, it's the Three Tenors all over again. And finally, the Tosca that I just mentioned, the DVD. This I watched. This is not bad. That's all right. Those are the DVDs. And that, my friends, is the complete Perlman. Let me put this away because I always have to be tidy. I'm putting this away. And there you go. The complete Warner Zubin Mehta. The Zubin Mehta complete Warner recordings. Now, where does that leave us with Zubin Mehta boxes? I'm gonna talk about the Symphony box because I don't know if that's still around, but we have the LA box. That's your first priority with Zubin Mehta. The Sony box, which is huge, has all the New York Philharmonic stuff and some Berlin Philharmonic and Israel stuff, has its points, but in a lot of ways, it's the least interesting of the three. There's a lot of stuff that he either did better on Decca or just isn't so great, and tons and tons and tons of accompanying stuff, which is nice because he's good at that. But that's not why you buy a Zubin Mehta box. Let's face it. And so then here's this one in the middle, number 2. You get the Decca box first. If you're happy and you want more, you can get this one, and then you can get the Sony one if you're really a glutton for punishment. I think that when we look at on the whole here, we see a conductor who, like so many guys these days, in especially in the 70s and 80s and 90s, made far too many recordings, made the same stuff duplicatively, not necessarily better, but also not worse. Not worse. I mean, if you compare these Zubin Mehta recordings, especially the New York Phil stuff on Teldec with the LA stuff, there's no decline. There's no second guessing. There's also not much change in interpretation, but that's not a mark against Mehta either. I mean, Karajan never changed anything. I mean, basically, and recorded the same thing 100 times. So, you don't have to see, growth. I mean, Furtwängler also never changed anything, really. I mean, the only thing that changed is whether the orchestra could play, or whether he got them to do it. But the interpretation stayed basically the same. We just have too much documentation of these people. Just too much. It's just too much. But that said, there is some wacky stuff, some useless stuff, but far more good stuff than bad stuff in this Zubin Mehta box. I was pretty impressed going through it. I really was. Just remembering just how good a lot of it really is. We forget because we're drowning. We're drowning in product. So, whether you want it or not is going to be your call. But it's a good reason to keep on listening. You'll be happier than not. Thank you. Take care.